The story begins with a close-up of a young woman named Tudo Masumi standing alone on a stage with a violin in her hands while looking incredibly sad and empty as if her soul is missing. She stares out into the vast rows of empty red theater seats while a voice critically remarks that her performance is completely empty and lacks any real emotion. The scene shifts to focus on the wooden instrument itself as the harsh voice questions what on earth she is even playing the violin for if she has no feelings to convey. A flashback reveals the hands of an elderly woman clutching at sheets in a bed while Masumi stands nearby in a blue skirt and the old woman calls out her name with a trembling voice. Masumi walks down a sterile hospital corridor carrying her instrument case while a younger staff member and an elderly woman named Tabata-san thank her profusely for coming to perform at their nursing home. She turns back with a gentle but sorrowful smile to tell them that she is the one who should be grateful for the opportunity to play because she can only offer her feelings through music. The staff member clasps her hands together tightly and tells Masumi that thanks to her performance everyone at the facility has become much brighter and happier. The younger woman laughs cheerfully and tells Masumi that she is so talented she should really become a professional violinist instead of just playing for them. Masumi walks away from the facility with her violin case slung over her shoulder while smiling bitterly and thinking to herself that becoming a professional is a massive exaggeration. She reaches her hand out toward the sky while standing in front of a modern building with large glass windows and thinks about how her life isn't moving forward. As she walks along the paved street, she blushes slightly while recalling the compliment about becoming a professional but quickly dismisses the thought as foolish. A memory surfaces of her younger self holding a violin with pure joy and excitement while sparkles surround her as she remembers how much she used to love playing. She recalls how she became obsessed with the instrument and practiced every single day in a music room filled with stands after her mother gave her the first violin. The memory continues to show her playing happily alongside a best friend who always looked forward to hearing her tone and played with her constantly. The tone shifts darker as the scene changes to a large white hospital building where she received the devastating news that her best friend had only 3 months left to live. Masumi holds her friend's frail hand on the bedsheet while looking terrified and heartbroken as her friend insists on entering their last competition together. The friend smiles gently despite her illness and asks Masumi to play with everything she has at the upcoming competition because she loves the way Masumi plays. Masumi visualizes her friend standing alone on a dark stage under a spotlight and remembers the request for her not to hold back anything during the performance. She remembers playing frantically while tears streamed down her face as she struggled with the overwhelming grief of knowing her friend would soon be gone. The narrative explains that on the day of the competition she couldn't play seriously because of her grief and after her friend died she gave up on being a professional. In the present day Masumi looks at her smartphone screen which displays a harsh email from a company stating that she did not meet their expectations and was rejected for the job. She stands alone in a public square surrounded by trees and city lights while realizing she is almost 30 years old without steady employment and feels deeply afraid of society. The scene focuses on her feet in sensible heels as she steps precariously close to the edge of a staircase while thinking about how quickly a person can fall in life. She walks past a shop window displaying Christmas cakes and sees happy couples and families celebrating while she remains completely alone with no lover or family. As she descends the stairs while clutching her violin case and coat, she suddenly loses her footing and begins to fall forward in a terrifying moment. The world spins around her as she plummets down the stairs and her vision goes black while she wonders if this is how her life ends. She wakes up sitting on the ground in a wooded area with trees surrounding her and wonders if she has died and arrived at the Sanzu River in the afterlife. She frantically checks her coat pockets and realizes that her wallet and phone are missing along with her bag which contained everything she owned. She quickly opens the hard black case to check on her instrument and is relieved to see the violin sits safely inside the velvet lining unharmed. Suddenly strange figures in dark heavy cloaks appear behind her and one of them grabs her shoulder while asking if she is a fellow professional. A man with long hair partially hidden by a hood leans in close to her face and accuses her of being sloppy and leading guards to their location. He glances down at the violin case and asks if she can play the instrument inside while noting that he has never seen such a design before. Masumi looks up at him with wide, fearful eyes and is completely confused by his strange questions and the sudden, aggressive confrontation. The man pulls her closer by her clothes and demands she play something to help them because they are empty after losing their first group of pursuers. Suddenly a loud noise startles them and the cloaked figures immediately turn and sprint away into the forest leaving Masumi alone and bewildered. A tall, imposing man with dark hair and a detailed military uniform approaches her from the shadows with a stern and suspicious expression. He looks down at her with cold eyes and asks what she is doing in a place like this while noting that he does not recognize her face and thinks she is a foreigner. He leans in closer to inspect her and accuses her of being a spy for a nation called Reiti because she seemed to understand the language of the previous men. Masumi frantically waves her hands and denies being a spy while explaining she just wanted to translate for herself, but he interrupts to ask about the box she is holding. He declares that they will check the contents of the box at his garrison and promises she won't be treated roughly if she behaves herself. The scene shifts to a detailed exterior shot of a grand multi-story mansion with large windows and a manicured garden where Masumi has been taken. Inside the mansion, a desk is cluttered with stacks of books and papers, and a nameplate that reads Classio Poetry sits amidst the chaotic workspace. The uniformed man, now identified as Lord Ark, sits behind the desk while a subordinate reports that they have captured a spy. Masumi lies tied up on the floor with ropes binding her hands and feet while she complains in pain that he promised not to be violent with her. Ark rests his chin on his gloved hand and looks down at her with a sharp gaze while telling her she has some nerve to sneak into the heart of the Night Order. He glances over at the large bookshelves behind him while casually discussing her intrusion as if it were a mere annoyance rather than a security breach. Masumi sits up angrily and shouts at him to let her go at once while asking if he truly doesn't know what a violin is when he calls it a weapon. He narrows his eyes suspiciously and decides that they will quickly determine her true identity by using a special identity-revealing enchantment. A complex geometric magic circle suddenly lights up on the floor underneath Masumi and glows brightly as she looks around in panic. Ark watches from his desk expecting information to float up as text but is surprised when the enchantment produces no reaction other than the glowing floor. He smiles with genuine interest and touches his lip while noting that it is fascinating she can evade the spell and must have strong protection. He stands up and tells his subordinate to step back because he will take over the investigation directly since the magic failed to reveal her identity. Masumi watches nervously as the tall man walks around the desk toward her and compliments her impressive ability to evade the enchantment. He sits casually on a leather sofa right in front of her and asks if her foolish appearance is just a disguise for being a top-notch spy. Masumi looks him in the eye with desperation and insists once again that she is absolutely not a spy while he questions how she bypassed the guards. He touches his chin thoughtfully and wonders if she used a concealment technique, and Masumi suddenly blurts out a long and complex name she remembers. Ark's eyes widen in genuine shock as she pronounces the name Arkristov Albarskanova, and he demands to know how she knows his full name. Masumi looks down at her lace dress and realizes based on the glowing floor and clothes that she is not in the afterlife but in a completely different world. He suddenly lunges forward and grabs her arm tightly to inspect it for hidden weapons or signs of combat training while she cries out in surprise. She struggles to pull her arm away and tells him to stop handling her so roughly, but he ignores her pleas and continues his physical inspection. He reaches over and flips the latches on her violin case to open it while Masumi watches with dread as her precious instrument is exposed. He looks at the wooden instrument and the bow with a puzzled expression and notes that the shape is different from what he expected but still thinks it is a weapon. Masumi leans forward with her head against his arm and begs him to stop touching it while tears form in her eyes because the violin is so important to her. He looks down at her coldly and tells her that if she wants to resist she should do it with more conviction because a desperate person would fight harder. He takes the violin out of the case and holds it out to her while demanding that if she is not a spy she must prove it by playing the instrument. Masumi stares at the violin in his hands with a look of conflicting emotions as painful memories of her failure and her friend's death rush back to her. Ark watches her hesitation closely and interprets it as suspicion because she is refusing to take the only opportunity to clear her name. He holds the violin by the neck like a club or a gun and looks at her with a darkened face while she realizes he truly sees it only as a tool for violence. She looks up with a fierce expression of anger and determination and swears internally that she will never play her precious violin for an unreasonable man like him. Masumi looks away with a stubborn expression as she internally vows that she will absolutely not play her instrument for these people while Lord Ark observes her closely. Ark sits on the windowsill and thinks that she is different from other spies because she does not appear to have strong enchantments on her despite sneaking into the inner grounds. He asks for her name and she replies that it is Masumi Tudo, which he finds to be a very weird and unfamiliar sounding name. Ark suddenly grabs her gloved hand firmly and tells her that he has an idea since she persists in saying that she will not play the instrument for him. Masumi pulls her hand away from his grip with a look of annoyance while thinking that she really cannot escape this situation now. A uniformed subordinate rushes into the room with a panicked expression to tell Lord Ark that there is an urgent matter requiring his immediate attention. Ark turns back to look at Masumi with a serious expression and orders her to stay put and wait because trying to run away would be useless. Masumi is left sitting alone on the patterned rug with her violin beside her while looking confused and overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events. The subordinate stands beside Ark in the hallway and explains that this new problem is far more urgent than handling a captured spy. He reveals that a musician named Kasumi Rees has deserted, and Ark looks completely shocked by this unexpected news. The narration explains that the Night Order retains house musicians to perform at ceremonies and their livelihood depends on playing instruments. Ark touches his face in frustration as the subordinate explains that the musician disappeared along with their luggage just before the preparations were reported. A silhouette shows a knight kneeling before a violinist as the text explains that the musician's tone blesses the loyalty sworn to the empire during the investiture. Ark listens intently with a serious expression as he is told that the investiture without a musician would severely damage the prestige of the Night Order. The subordinate explains that they were watching, but the musician used a concealment spell to escape during a brief moment when they looked away at midnight. Ark rubs his forehead in annoyance and asks why they took their eyes off the target while the subordinate looks nervous and apologetic. The subordinate suggests hiring from the large regional city of Vestofa but notes that it is unlikely they will find someone befitting Lord Ark's high standards. Ark looks away with a resigned expression as the subordinate explains that people are refusing the job because working for the awe-inspiring Lord Ark is too intimidating. Ark stares intensely at the black violin case sitting on the floor while realizing that the deserter also possessed a similar instrument called a villard. Masumi sits alone in the room touching her neck where she was grabbed and reassures herself that it doesn't hurt and she will be fine. She holds her violin tenderly and thinks about how she expected to be in the afterlife but instead got caught up in something weird and impossible to escape. She plucks the strings of her violin gently to check its condition and is relieved to find that nothing seems broken or damaged. A flashback shows a young Masumi standing in a hospital room looking at an empty bed where her mentor died and left the violin to her in their will. She hugs the instrument close to her chest and thinks that she can't imagine playing any other instrument because she has only ever played this specific violin. Masumi looks down with a determined expression and decides that she doesn't care where she is as long as she can exist with this beautiful sound. The door slams open loudly and Masumi jumps in fright as Lord Ark storms back into the room with his subordinate following closely behind. Ark glares at her with intense eyes and demands to confirm that she said she was a musician earlier while Masumi looks terrified by his aggression. He points accusingly at the instrument on the floor and asks if that villard belongs to her while she tries to explain that she is not a professional. Ark looks over at the bookshelf dismissively and states that if the instrument is hers then the matter is settled quickly and she must be able to play it. He stands tall and commands her that she will perform as the musician at the upcoming night investiture ceremony. Masumi stares up at him with wide eyes and a look of complete shock as sparkles float around the room from the magical atmosphere. Ark looks down at her with an impatient expression as he notices her hesitation and silence regarding his direct order. She clutches her instrument protectively and stammers that she already told him she didn't want to play earlier. Ark leans forward with a dark expression and threatens that since she is a captured, suspicious person, he could have her executed if he commanded it. He stands confidently with his subordinate and claims that her fate is left entirely to his judgment, so she has no choice but to obey. Masumi looks up at him with dull, lifeless eyes and tells him that threats about execution don't mean anything because she is already dead. Ark looks genuinely confused by her statement and asks her to clarify what she means by saying she is dead. She explains that she fell down the station stairs and thought that he had caught her in the afterlife when she woke up here. Ark stares at her with a realization dawning on his face and asks if she even knows where she currently is. Masumi looks at him with a puzzled expression as he informs her that she is in the Alberic Empire located in the far north of the central continent. Her eyes widen in shock and she breaks into a cold sweat as she finally realizes that this is actually another world and not the afterlife. A detailed view of the city shows medieval European architecture with a castle on a hill and a river running through the town, which confirms it is not her world. Masumi looks out the window at the strange city and sees her feet firmly on the ground wearing her shoes, which proves she is alive. Ark approaches her from behind and touches her shoulder while admitting that he thought it was strange how she appeared so suddenly. He explains that her story didn't add up and the identity-revealing enchantment didn't work, which led him to investigate further. He leans in very close to her face and states with certainty that she is not dead and this place is definitely not the other world. Ark looks down at her with a commanding gaze and tells her that no matter how tough she acts, her life is still in his hands. He declares once again with absolute authority that she will be his musician at the investiture ceremony. Masumi sits quietly on a plush chair in the mansion library while the blonde subordinate stands by the open door and informs her that it is time to head to the venue for the ceremony. She looks down with a solemn expression and finally accepts the reality that this place is truly another world rather than the afterlife she initially suspected. The narrative reveals that she was asked to perform the violin at the knight investiture ceremony specifically to take the place of a musician who had escaped. She grips the fabric of her dress and admits to herself that she agreed to the request simply because it seemed like there was absolutely no other choice available to her. The scene explains that the investiture is a vital ritual where the commander grants the necessary magic for knights to fight through the musician's performance, which is called a blessing. Masumi rides on a horse behind the blonde subordinate through the town streets and asks why the previous musician ran away and if the pay was terrible. The subordinate explains that they paid the full amount up front whatever was asked and specifically chose a solitary unmarried musician to avoid family complications. She presses him further by asking if the work was unbelievably harsh or if they were forced to play for 24 hours straight without food or water. The subordinate denies this by stating the performance is at most 30 minutes and then abruptly increases the horse's pace to avoid explaining further while Masumi yells at him to wait. They arrive at the destination, which turns out to be a massive and imposing Colosseum-like structure that serves as the venue for the investiture ceremony. Masumi looks up at the towering architecture in awe and realizes that the most important part of their discussion about the previous musician was conveniently cut short. Crowds of people rush toward the entrance, including a mother and child who hurry to ensure they can get seats before they are all taken. Two young men gaze up at the building with excitement and declare that the day they have dreamed of since they were kids has finally arrived. Masumi watches the excited crowd and grips her chest anxiously while wondering if she will really be able to fulfill the important role of the musician. The subordinate announces their arrival and helps Masumi down from the horse while noting that Lord Ark is already over there making preparations. She looks down with a shadowed face and thinks that no matter how seriously she plays, she cannot bring out the same sound she had before the international competitions. Ark turns to face them wearing ceremonial armor and remarks that the preparations for the ceremony are nearly complete and all that remains is the performance. He greets Masumi with a word of praise for her cooperation and asks her to tell them what she needs for her performance and how much time she requires to tune. Masumi smiles with a hint of irony and thinks to herself that the polite treatment she is receiving now is a night and day difference from when she was suspected as a spy. She asks if it is acceptable that she is not playing in an ensemble with anyone else, and Ark confirms that if that is how it is, then it is fine. As they walk together, Masumi asks for instructions on when to start and stop playing, and the subordinate tells her she just needs to stand in the center of the altar. Ark instructs her to begin playing when the blue light starts to overflow and explains that she may end as she wishes once the last knight receives the light. Masumi looks at Ark's elaborate attire and comments that clothes really do make the man, which causes Ark to look at her with confusion. She clarifies that she means his current outfit suits him really well, and Ark explains that it is not quite full dress but is still stifling. He adjusts his cape and explains that full dress has more decoration and is heavier while asking if she is mocking him with her questions. Masumi denies mocking him and says she would like to see the full dress if he dislikes it so much, but Ark bluntly refuses her request. Ark clears his throat and admits that they only managed to prepare a musician thanks to a strange mix of bad and good fortune. He looks at his subordinates and expresses concern about entrusting such an important role to a suspected spy whose skill level is unknown to them. Despite his doubts, he states that it is good they will be able to hold the investiture ceremony safely, though he cannot celebrate fully just yet. He looks away with a somber expression and admits there is a chance the ceremony could end in failure and it won't solve the underlying problems of the order. The subordinate calls out to Lord Ark and mistakenly addresses Masumi as Kasumi Rees to signal that it is time to go to the altar. The view opens up to reveal the vast interior of the arena filled with spectators as Ark leads the way and says, "Let's go." Rows of knights stand in perfect formation on the arena floor as Masumi and the group walk past them toward the stage. Page 19. Ark pauses and extends his hand to Masumi to help her as they prepare to step onto the main platform. Masumi takes his hand and thinks to herself that she knows all too well that she is not what this place truly needs. She walks forward while thinking that they only chose her out of convenience because they simply wanted someone who can play regardless of who it was. As she walks onto the stage alone carrying her violin, she admits she would be lying if she said she had no doubts about standing there. She stands alone in the vast space and worries that she may not be able to play with the same determination she had back in her competition days. Ark stands tall in the distance and smiles confidently at her to give her a silent boost of encouragement before the ceremony begins. Page 22. Masumi recalls the excited face of the child she saw in town earlier and the anticipation of the people waiting for this day. The image focuses on the hilt of a sword as Masumi decides that if there is something she can do, then surely standing on this stage is not a mistake. Ark raises his sword high in the air before the formation of knights and declares that those who are about to become knights shall be blessed. The sword points toward the sky as Ark recites the oath to protect the nation, protect the weak, and guard the truth. He shouts for them to be brave, faithful, and generous while holding true to their convictions as the ceremony reaches its peak. Ark announces that he grants them the power of a sword that cuts evil and a shield that repels malice as magic sparkles around him. Magic flows outward as he wishes for them to become guardians of all, and the light begins to overflow as the signal for Masumi to play. Masumi positions her violin and decides to play Edward Elgar's Pomp and Circumstance for this occasion. She closes her eyes and focuses on the splendid yet heroic tone of the march, which was composed to color the military. She thinks about how she doesn't know this world, but for the knights carrying pride and the people waiting with admiration, this piece surely fits. Masumi stands in the center of the gate and begins to play her violin with passion as the music swells and fills the arena. The magical light intensifies around her as she plays, and the energy of the ceremony reaches a crescendo with her performance. Masumi marching through the streets packed with festival-like crowds as the people celebrate the day's events. Although the main event of the investiture ceremony ended safely, Masumi feels conflicted because she knows she still hasn't been able to perform with her full strength. She realizes that the trauma keeping her from truly playing won't be undone easily, a fact that hit her the moment she lowered her bow after the performance. Despite the shock of that realization, she foolishly can't help but expect that someday she might find the key to breaking this curse. Masumi stands exhausted in a courtyard thinking she is done, but Lord Ark approaches with his horse and informs her that she must now watch the jousting match with Kasumi Rees. She complains that she doesn't even know what jousting is and is exhausted from standing, but Ark insists she cannot be left alone because her identity is still unclear. Ark explains that since she hasn't been completely cleared of spy suspicions yet, she must remain under supervision. He states that he has a dinner with the mayor, so he cannot take her along himself, leaving her to watch the traditional match without him. Masumi sits in a shaded spectator box with the blonde knight, Kasumi Rees, and feels relieved about the roof but stifled by the heat and crowds. She glances at Kasumi and thinks about how bad she is with him because he is always expressionless and she can't tell what he is thinking. Her thoughts are interrupted when her stomach growls loudly, prompting Kasumi to break his silence and ask if she is hungry. Kasumi apologizes for not noticing sooner and says he will order someone to buy food from the street stalls outside. Masumi retorts that of course she is hungry because she hasn't eaten anything since they captured her, and Kasumi tells the messenger to make it quick. A messenger arrives with a sandwich that smells like grilled meat and addresses the blonde knight as captain, which confuses Masumi. She takes the food and starts eating while wondering why the messenger called him captain since she thought Ark was the leader. Kasumi stares at her while she eats and admits he has a presumptuous question to ask the musician. He asks if her contract with the Supreme Commander is only for this one occasion, referring to the investiture ceremony. Masumi thinks to herself that there wasn't really a contract, just an emergency situation where she lent a hand, but wonders if he means a contract to perform. Kasumi explains that if her arrangement was temporary, he wanted to approach her before the other knights got the chance. He looks at her earnestly and asks that if she is not anyone's exclusive musician yet, would she please become his exclusive musician? Suddenly, Lord Ark appears and angrily demands an excuse from Kasumi, reminding him that private negotiations with musicians are forbidden. Masumi tries to defend Kasumi by stammering that he only went to buy food for her and they were just exchanging a few words. Ark dismisses the excuse and orders Kasumi to return to his seat, leaving Masumi to feel incredibly awkward about the tension. Down in the arena, armored knights crash into each other with lances, causing Masumi to flinch at the violence of the impact. She covers her eyes in distress, and Ark notices her discomfort, apologizing and saying he didn't mean to make her watch something so brutal. Ark explains that while the matches might look dull, they emphasize thrusting skills, which makes the difference in ability obvious to observers. He points out the people in the crowd and explains that the matches have another purpose, which is why everyone uses the same attack. Ark reveals that the spectators are nobles and merchant families from West Ofa who are there to choose daughters-in-law or adoptees. He explains that they are looking for talented youths to bring into their families and that the tournament lasts for 7 days. Masumi compares it to a horse auction, but Ark explains that some knights hope for this as it is a chance for commoners to become nobles. Masumi spots Kasumi returning and asks Ark if he is popular in town since he is the captain of the royal guard. Ark smiles and admits that while he has had marriage talks, what he honestly wants more than that is an exclusive musician. Masumi presses him to explain the connection between musicians and knights, asking what exactly an exclusive musician is since everyone seems obsessed with them. Ark looks at her with surprise and comments that for someone with such skill, it is strange she doesn't know the value of an exclusive musician. Before he can answer, loud bells begin to clang across the arena, signaling an interruption to the event. An announcement declares that all scheduled matches for the day are cancelled, leaving Masumi confused by the sudden turn of events. The announcement continues to state that a state of alert has been issued and the Fourth Night Order must deploy immediately for monster subjugation. A high-angle view of the city streets where crowds of anxious people gather near the protective walls while wondering what they should do now that monsters have reportedly appeared. Knights in armor stand ready at their stations while discussing whether they have enough equipment and trying to reassure the frightened citizens that they will protect them. A terrified child clings to her mother's apron while saying she is scared, and the mother gently pats her head to comfort her amidst the rising tension. Lord Ark shouts commands to his troops to assume first-class battle stations while knights discuss that they have enough supplies for now but worry about a prolonged battle. Ark orders those without mounts to borrow tournament horses while asking for a report on the number and type of monsters approaching. Masumi stands quietly in her dress while thinking that she needs to make sure she does not get in the way during this emergency. Ark turns to Masumi with a serious expression and orders her to come with him because she must remain under surveillance until she is completely cleared of spy suspicions. Suddenly, a massive dark wolf monster looms over the city wall with a menacing grin while Masumi stares up at it in absolute disbelief and shock. A swarm of smaller black shadow wolves charges toward the gate while Ark commands the first through third lances to spread to the front to hold the line. The knights clash violently with the dark creatures as they try to push back the wave of monsters attacking their city. Ark rides his white horse with Masumi seated in front of him while drawing his sword and ordering the troops to move out and cut down the 300 targets as much as possible. They gallop through a wooded area on horseback while another knight rides alongside them to keep pace with the commander. Ark looks forward with a grim expression as the other knight reports that the defense line looks like it is breaking and everyone is falling one after another. Masumi looks down at the carnage with sweat on her face and asks Ark why he is only defending instead of using big magic to attack. Ark turns his head to explain that they would use big magic if they could, but not having an exclusive musician makes that impossible right now. Masumi stares at him with wide eyes and asks what he means by that statement regarding the exclusive musician. Suddenly a powerful impact hits the group and they realize with horror that they are about to be wiped out by the overwhelming force. A massive burst of energy explodes in the forest clearing and sends debris flying into the air as a spell is unleashed. The blonde knight Kasumi Rees collapses onto the ground beside his horse while Masumi sits nearby looking relieved that she was saved by the blast. Masumi rushes over to Kasumi who is lying on the ground and frantically asks him what is wrong while urging him to stay with her. Kasumi struggles to breathe while sweat pours down his face and he tries to reassure her that there are no injuries so she shouldn't worry. She looks at him with guilt and realizes that his condition is her fault because he used up his magic to protect her from the attack. She thinks about how he dragged her along to protect her even though he couldn't fight and realizes that once again someone might die because of her. A flashback shows Masumi's mother in a hospital bed who always supported her violin playing but passed away when Masumi was 14. She remembers her strict but caring violin teacher who supported her through her grief but also eventually passed away from pneumonia. Another memory reveals her best friend Cynthia sitting in a hospital bed who shared the same dream of entering international competitions but died before they could. In the present, Masumi stares at Kasumi's hand on the dirt and wonders desperately if there is anything she can do to save him. Ark looks down at them from his horse with a pained expression while Masumi begs him to teach her if there is something only a musician can do. She looks up at Ark with tears in her eyes and admits that she cannot fight like everyone else but wants to help. Ark explains that the reason everyone wants an exclusive musician is because they have the ability to recover a knight's mana through their performance. Masumi touches her face as she finally understands the true value and purpose of a musician in this world. She stands up with determination and tells Kasumi to hang in there a little longer because she has an idea. She grabs Kasumi's hand and starts leading him back toward the city gate while telling him to come with her. She recalls seeing a noble girl carrying a case that looked like a violin earlier during the ceremony preparations. The scene shifts to the nobles inside the walls who are panicking as the sounds of battle get closer and they wonder if they will be safe. Masumi runs through the crowd and spots the girl with the instrument case and calls out to her apologize for the sudden intrusion. She points at the case the girl is holding and confirms that it is indeed an instrument inside. The girl opens the case to reveal a stringed instrument that looks like a violin but with more strings and a slightly different shape. Masumi bows her head and desperately asks the girl if she can borrow the instrument to save everyone. The girl looks confused and asks if Masumi is a musician since she is asking for the instrument. Masumi denies being a professional but explains that she needs it just until she can restore the knight's mana to prevent the monsters from wiping everyone out. She clenches her chest and thinks that she cannot just sit there doing nothing while watching everyone die around her. The girl hands the instrument to Masumi and tells her to please use it while Masumi thanks her profusely. Masumi tightens the pegs of the instrument to tune it while Kasumi watches her from the ground nearby. She walks back toward Kasumi with a confident smile and apologizes in advance if the performance is a little worse than the one at the investiture ceremony. She positions the bow and begins to play Chardosh by Vittorio Monti while reflecting on her past in her old world. As her fingers move across the fingerboard, she remembers how she kept blaming herself for being powerless after her loved ones left her behind. She plays with intense emotion and thinks that she still can't forgive herself but wants to do everything she can at the very least. Ark watches her play with a look of surprise on his face as he realizes he never thought a day like this would come. Kasumi sits up as his mana recovers rapidly and asks Masumi if she is all right now that the performance is over. He smiles warmly at her and thanks her for giving such a wonderful performance to save him. Masumi smiles back at him with genuine relief and happiness that she was able to help. Suddenly the black wolves break through the defensive wall and the situation becomes critical again. Ark steps forward with his hand glowing with power and commends them for the cleanup so far while declaring that he will handle the rest from here. The battle has ended with half the beasts driven off, but many soldiers have suffered bad injuries in the process. Only about 30% of the forces can still fight properly, yet Lord Ark determines that if they can do that much, it is more than enough. A subordinate asks about the beast's condition and the remaining forces while Ark stands tall despite the chaotic situation. The subordinate notes that it took quite a while for Ark to end up this battered, but Ark dismisses the concern by saying this much is nothing. Ark loudly commands those who can still move or have magic left to reorganize into Squad A to prepare for any further threats. He orders the wounded soldiers to be sent to the rear while instructing others to secure the citizens' safety and contact them immediately if there is an emergency. Masumi watches in awe and thinks it is amazing how everyone's mood changed just by this person arriving on the scene. The knights look energized and reassured by their commander's presence and decisive leadership during the crisis. Ark turns to Masumi with a charming smile and tells her to stay in the back with Kasumi Rees because he will finish this quickly. He sincerely thanks her for playing the instrument for Kasumi Rees before heading back into the fray to handle the situation. Masumi looks surprised by his gratitude as the narrative reveals that the beasts attacking the jousting ground were all safely defeated without further incident. Later at the mansion, a maid asks Lady Masumi if her meal was satisfactory and tells her to ask any time if she has other requests. Masumi touches her cheek and realizes she is being treated differently now that she is considered a court musician instead of a prisoner. The maid opens a large double door and invites Masumi to please relax and enjoy the room prepared for her. Masumi walks into the room but stops in confusion when she sees someone already inside waiting for her. Lord Ark is sitting casually on a sofa with his shirt unbuttoned and looks at her with an annoyed expression while asking what she is doing there. He explains that this was originally his room, so of course he is here, and clarifies he isn't staying with her because he likes it. Masumi looks at him with a disgusted expression and asks why he is there while he retorts that that is his line. Ark tells her not to just stand there and invites her to come sit over by him on the adjacent furniture. She looks hesitant but he insists he can't leave a spy alone after all, which annoys her because he brought that accusation up again. He picks up the black violin case and says he forgot to hand this over to her earlier amidst the chaos. Masumi sits on the adjacent sofa as Ark explains that the garrison commander brought it personally to ensure it was safe. He mentions that if the instrument got even one wound the commander's head would roll because it is his personal musician's Villard. Masumi holds her violin and comments on his violent way of speaking while noting she doesn't know about that standard of judgment. Ark rubs his forehead with his hand and looks visibly tired as he dismisses the topic as nothing to fuss about. Masumi notices his condition and asks why he is acting like this all of a sudden and if he is okay. He looks terribly exhausted and leans back while Masumi asks if he is injured or just tired from the battle. She leans closer to check on him and suggests that maybe he should sleep already since it must have been hard. Ark stares at her intently with a soft expression as she inspects his face for injuries or signs of fatigue. He suddenly asks her to play for him if she acknowledges the knight's achievements during the battle. Masumi is confused by the sudden request and asks what is with this all of a sudden. He asks if she could play just one piece but then immediately calls it nonsense and tells her to forget what he just said. He looks away and says he must be tired so he will sleep, and tells her there is a bed prepared for her in the next room. Masumi interrupts him and says she can at least listen to someone's story even if she doesn't know much about his world. She admits that today she realized how different her world is from his and she doesn't understand beasts or magic at all. She points out his condescending tone and notes that he calls people spies and threatens them immediately when tense. However, she acknowledges that in front of the beasts and for the people he was truly desperate, so she can listen to his story a little. Arc explains that originally knights act as the shield to protect the magic corps who act as the spear to defeat enemies. He details that in this country there are knight orders specialized in defensive magic and magic corps specialized in offensive magic. He states that to be a shield you need a supply line to provide magic power, which comes from a musician. Masumi listens as he reveals that their fourth knight order has no musician to supply magic and thus cannot function as a shield. Arc sits on the floor by the fireplace and says they petitioned the country many times, but musicians are always allocated to the magic corps first. He clenches his hands together and says without magic recovery, the knight orders are just pawns of the country. He asserts that they are human and don't want to die in vain, but are prepared for an honorable death when it comes. He looks down sadly and murmurs that maybe it is pointless to tell her this since she is from another world. Masumi begins to play a gentle melody on her violin while smiling softly at him to offer comfort. Her hand moves gracefully with a bow and sparks of light float around them as she says if a sound is made it is a performance. Arc listens with a peaceful expression as the music fills the room and asks if that is her playing. He looks at her with admiration and comments that to have kept it up this long until now she must be skillful. Masumi continues playing while sitting on the sofa and explains she has been doing it since she was 3 years old. A flashback shows young Masumi playing happily and thinking she could play forever because it was fun to do more and more. Present-day Masumi smiles and says no amount of time felt enough because she loved it so much. Arc looks at her with a serious gaze and says he feels the same way about his own path as a knight. He smiles warmly and explains that he became a knight to serve this country because he loves it. A visual shows Arc standing before a crowd as he declares he wants to protect the people of the country that gave him this life. They sit together in the quiet room while the atmosphere becomes tender and intimate between them. The light from the magic and music continues to drift around them, creating a romantic mood. Masumi thinks to herself that she doesn't know why, but a feeling filled her up at that moment. She realizes that she just wanted to be with him and hold him close right then as they shared this quiet moment. The chapter concludes with Masumi mentally thanking Arc for talking to her as the scene fades. Masumi sits on the sofa while Arc leans back comfortably and asks her if she would like a change of clothes since she has been wearing the same outfit for days. Masumi agrees immediately because her current outfit is reaching its limit, but she clarifies that she doesn't need anything expensive or fancy, just something suitable for everyday wear. The scene shifts to a bright clothing store in town where Masumi walks through the aisles looking at the racks of garments while Arc waits in the background. A young noblewoman named Anshila, who is the daughter of Duke Marino where the knights are currently based, helps Masumi choose an outfit by holding a patterned dress against her. Masumi smiles warmly and tells Anshila that having her help choose is lovely and really saves her, to which Anshila replies that it is better to hear a woman's opinion on women's clothes. Anshila explains that the estate Arc is using actually belongs to her family and they lend it out every year during the investiture ceremony, often hosting musicians there as well. Masumi looks surprised as she realizes that she had assumed the mansion belonged to the knights because Arc was using it so confidently. As they continue shopping, Anshila looks tense and asks if Masumi has met previous musicians, while Masumi wonders why the girl seems so nervous around her. Arc sits on a sofa looking bored and asks if they are done yet, noting that he feels like he has met Anshila somewhere before. He stands up and tells Masumi that she didn't really have to follow him all the way there, but reminds her that she is still under suspicion as a spy so he cannot leave her alone. Masumi looks through a rack of clothes and tells him that if he finds it such a bother, he could have had Kasumi Rees look after her instead. Arc explains that Kasumi Rees doesn't have time because he is supervising the joust today, so Arc has to do it himself. The scene flashes back briefly to Arc paying the bill at the store and signing the purchase order with his name to be sent to the garrison in the imperial capital. Masumi watches him and thinks about the previous day when he cried, noting that neither of them has brought it up to avoid making things awkward. Outside the shop, and Sheila suggests that since it is almost mealtime, they should have a meal before heading to the next shop. They sit at an outdoor table at a restaurant where Masumi eats delicious food with a happy expression while Sheila asks if she wouldn't prefer a calmer seat inside. Ark eats his meal and says he doesn't mind sitting outside because the weather is nice and it feels more relaxed. And Sheila thanks Masumi for the smooth shopping trip and expresses her gratitude for Masumi playing her instrument during the monster attack yesterday. Masumi looks confused when Sheila says she saved them, but Sheila insists that it is not an exaggeration to say Masumi saved everyone. Sheila reveals that she was the one who lent Masumi the instrument yesterday because she was on her way back from picking up her sister Villard's instrument from repairs. She looks down sadly and admits that she wanted to be of help because she often feels like a burden who can't do anything useful compared to her sister who works outside. Sheila explains that she is in charge of hosting the musicians every year but they are never satisfied and sometimes she even gets scolded. Masumi realizes that Sheila was tense around her because she didn't want to upset her like she had with other musicians in the past. Sheila looks at Masumi with admiration and says she envied her yesterday because she was truly amazing when she stood up to fight. Masumi reaches out and holds Sheila's hand, telling her that she is the one who should be thanking Sheila because she couldn't have performed without the instrument she lent her. She smiles gently and reassures Sheila that she is not a burden at all, which makes Sheila blush with happiness. Their conversation is interrupted when a servant arrives with a message for Sheila that a friend has arrived at the estate and she must return immediately. Sheila apologizes for leaving early and says her servants will handle the rest of the shopping as she heads back to the estate. Left alone at the table, Ark comments that he initially thought Masumi was gloomy but realizes she is actually kind-hearted. Masumi denies being kind-hearted and says she just listened a little, claiming it isn't worth pointing out. Ark points out that she is always sticking her neck in here and there, citing how she treated him yesterday and how she just acted with the Merino girl. He looks at her with a serious expression and thinks to himself that he can't leave her alone because seeing her lose sight of her own worth feels like looking at himself. Later, as they walk down the street, Masumi trips and starts to fall forward. A handsome stranger catches her before she hits the ground and asks if she is all right while apologizing for spacing out and bumping into her. The man looks at her face closely and seems to recognize her, asking if she is the commander's musician who played at the investiture yesterday. He praises her wonderful performance and remarks that with her, it is like the knights have 100 men on their side. The stranger comments that Ark has struggled until now and notes that if the 4th Knights had a musician earlier, they could have functioned better and the citizens would have felt at ease. He reaches out and touches her cheek while saying it is careless work to leave such an important musician alone. Suddenly, the man pulls Masumi into a tight embrace and whispers that she shouldn't let go of something precious, leaving Masumi shocked and confused, the musician of our country, as the scene opens in a dark room. A man wearing a heavy cloak stands by a window looking out at a bird while Masumi lies bound and gagged on the floor behind him as he comments that the burden would be too heavy for someone of lower rank but reasonable for a Bainret class. Masumi lies helplessly on the patterned carpet while looking up at her captor and wondering where she is and who this person standing before her might be. The scene focuses on the tight ropes binding Masumi's arms and torso over her lace dress as she realizes she is completely tied up and unable to move. She thinks to herself that if he isn't a knight then he must be what Ark called a magician because his physical build seems much slighter compared to the knights she knows like Ark or Kasumi Reese. As she wonders for what purpose he kidnapped her, she suddenly recognizes the sound of his voice and a realization strikes her about his identity. A flashback shows the cloaked figure she bumped into previously in town and the man who spoke to her when she was lost in the forest as she connects that they are the same person. The man turns to reveal his face with a smirk and confirms that while he wasn't sure back then, he knows now, and explains that the tone of a voice is something that cannot be changed. He explains that with training one can expand their vocal range and manipulate pitch across 4 octaves to fool others, but the inherent quality remains the same. He looks down at her with a sharp gaze and asks what her goal is while noting that for someone who only half listened she remembered the details of their encounter quite well. Masumi looks up at him as he states that in every age and place, the people most targeted by assassins in a night order are always obvious. She realizes that he thinks she is the commander's musician and that he is using her as bait to lure Ark out, assuming Ark must be frantically searching for her by now. Masumi lies on a sofa still bound and tells him it is too bad for him because she is not Ark's exclusive musician so she has absolutely no value as a hostage. The man looks completely shocked and confused as Masumi explains that she only played the instrument because she was urgently asked to do so during the emergency. She admits she glossed over the details earlier because it was a hassle to explain, but clarifies firmly that she did not become an exclusive musician. He listens as she explains that she just happened to be there holding an instrument by chance and was forced to fill in while the real musician escaped in the chaos. She continues to explain that she accidentally trespassed into the garrison in the first place and was immediately slapped with suspicion of being a spy. The man looks skeptical and plainly asks if she expects him to believe she was just there by chance, questioning how she slipped through the intrusion detection spells. Misumi replies that she doesn't know either because she is just an ordinary person who cannot even use magic. The man looks disappointed and realizes that there is no meaning in abducting her if she is just a normal person, admitting they chose the wrong target. Misumi thinks that if the real musician had been the one to escape, the Night Order would have been in an uproar just as the kidnapper expected, allowing him to strike at Ark. She reflects that although the details of his plan are unclear, he ended up with someone troublesome like her instead of the important musician, and she actually feels a little sorry for him. She wonders if the reason she can think so calmly is because she still can't fully grasp the reality of the situation and feels like she is watching from an outsider's perspective. The man states he doesn't fully believe her story yet and finds it hard to accept that she lent her power to the Fourth Night Order without any guarantee of reward. He mocks her by calling her a useless musician stuck with a useless Night Order, and says that in a way the situation suits a pointless do-gooder with rotten luck like her. Misumi gets angry at his insults and asks if he is picking a fight with her, telling him that is not something he should say to someone he just met. He steps forward and decides that even if the abduction was a mistake, he will tell her what kind of people the Fourth Night Order really are to give meaning to this encounter. A close-up of his eye shows intense emotion as he tells her just how worthless the so-called honorable knights she admires truly are. He explains that while the order looks impressive now with many knights, it was originally on the verge of being disbanded with reduced numbers. The narrative reveals that Ark restored the order by boasting overwhelming magical power and becoming supreme commander at the age of 15. A visual shows Ark traveling across the empire to gather candidates and using his enormous magic to increase the number of knights from 10 to 20. It explains that he had to share his magic with those he appointed as embers, and even recruiting the powerful Kasumi Rees was thanks to the commander's power. The man admits their work performance was astonishingly effective and Ark managed to maintain the order with those results. However, he reveals their grave sin is that the Fourth Night Order burns through their musicians because the supporting musicians bear a heavy burden as their lifeline. He states that no musician could keep up with the extreme duties of such a young supreme commander, and since Ark turned 18 there has been no exclusive musician. He explains that their strength is far beyond any other order, but one after another the musicians left the commander's side, with none lasting more than 3 months. So while Ark succeeded in reviving the order, they simultaneously became known with the bad reputation of being the order that burns through musicians. He asks if she still doesn't get it after all his explanation and warns her that she too will suffer soon enough because they won't let her go once they find a musician. Misumi thanks him for the warning, but he tells her that she really doesn't understand that any musician involved with them will end up unhappy. He touches her face and compliments her as a rare talent based on what he saw at the ceremony, stating that just her not returning would be a serious blow to the knights. He proposes they seal it with a blood pact, and asks her to become the musician of his country instead. He looks at her seductively and promises that if she can promise never to return to the Fourth Night Order, he will welcome her with honor. He calls her by her name, Misumi, while waiting for her answer. Misumi smiles as she remembers Ark thanking her for playing the instrument, which strengthens her resolve. She looks at the man and asks if she looks like she is joking, stating she doesn't know who he is and refuses his offer because she won't follow words alone. She questions his talk of honor after being treated so roughly and asks why she should throw herself away on his advice. She admits she seems to be a soft-hearted fool, but she just can't abandon people in trouble, referring to the knights. The man is baffled that she still chooses to take their hand even after his explanation about the weight of being tied to the Fourth Night Order. He realizes that her way of thinking is not how people in this world usually think and says he doesn't understand her. He recalls she mentioned losing her memory and wonders if she was summoned, realizing she might be from another world. Suddenly a massive explosion rocks the building and debris flies everywhere as the wall is breached. Lord Ark strides briskly down the opulent hallway with a serious expression while the large estate looms silently in the night outside. He comes across Lady Anshila, who stands in the hallway looking slightly surprised to see him return so soon. And Sheila explains that she came back early because her father summoned her regarding a family matter. Lord Ark looks at her with concern and asks if she is currently alone because he was under the impression she went to the city with the others. Loud footsteps suddenly echo against the floor as someone runs frantically toward them from down the hall. Ark turns his head sharply while Sheila looks on with worry as they anticipate the arrival of the newcomer. A dark-haired man rushes into the scene looking breathless and distressed while Lord Ark immediately asks if the errand was completed safely and inquires about the respected musician. The man delivers the devastating news that Masumi has completely disappeared, which causes Lady Sheila to cover her mouth in shock and horror. A crumpled letter is thrown onto a surface revealing the demands of the kidnappers. The letter states that it was found at the exact spot where Masumi vanished, and it threatens that the commander must come alone if he wishes for the musician to be returned safely. Ark reads the paper grimly and suggests that this could be the work of the neighboring country Reiti given the recent unsettling movements around the investiture ceremony. The dark-haired subordinate leans against a wall in frustration while clutching his head. He laments that it is hard to believe this is unrelated to the other incidents and admits he was distracted handling magical beasts in the city when Masumi vanished. He expresses anger at how cunning the enemy was to use such a large beast appearance as a diversion to abduct her. Lord Ark immediately turns to leave with the intention of searching for her himself, but his subordinate shouts for him to calm down. Ark argues that playing along with their demand to come alone is the proper course of action to ensure her safety. The frantic subordinate tries to reason with him by asking what he thinks will happen if the commander is seen charging into enemy territory by himself. The subordinate continues to argue that the citizens are still shaken from the wolf attacks and the recent incidents, so seeing their leader wandering alone would cause a massive panic. Ark stops moving and looks conflicted as he considers the consequences of causing an uproar in the city. The subordinate suggests a compromise where they form a small search party to scout the city under the pretense of reconnaissance since the letter did not specify a location. He reasons that the enemy must have left a clue to lure Ark out and asks if this plan is acceptable. Ark agrees to the plan but commands him to execute it quickly. Lord Ark stands alone in a dimly lit library room leaning over a desk with his head hung low in frustration and worry. He thinks to himself that if the threat is genuine and the sender really is a spy from Reiti, then they have failed Masumi completely. He stares at the magic circle on the floor while realizing that their negligence has resulted in something truly unforgivable happening to her. The scene shifts to the town at night where soldiers are actively patrolling and searching through the streets with lanterns. A woman looks tearful and distressed as she speaks to one of the gloved soldiers during the investigation. The soldiers suddenly look up in shock as a glowing magical bird appears in the dark sky above the town buildings. Lord Ark watches the phenomenon from the mansion window while his subordinate rushes in to report that the search party spotted a suspicious rose-colored firebird flying their way. Ark confirms that he sees the magical construct approaching the tower. Ark explains that when someone urgently needs to contact a person far away, they can use their own magic to create a familiar as a messenger. He notes that while the shape is easy to make, the color of the manifested magic always reflects the unique color of the user. Ark observes the bird and notes that a red-based hue has not been seen in years since most mage commanders have warm orange tones and knights use cold colors. He deduces that the sender is not one of their own people and admits he has no clue whose color this represents. The glowing bird changes direction and flies specifically toward the horse grounds. The magical bird flies down to Lord Ark and lands gently in his open palm before dissipating into particles of light. Ark declares that they have found the location based on the bird's guidance. The subordinate asks if they should send knights there despite not knowing if the information is reliable, but agrees it is worth checking. Lord Ark decides to go alone this time to avoid stirring up any more commotion in the city. He instructs his subordinate to handle the cleanup and stay behind. The subordinate agrees to the order and earnestly asks Lord Ark to save the musician. Lord Ark mounts a white horse and rides swiftly through the trees under the moonlight with a look of fierce determination on his face. As he rides, he reflects on how hectic everything became after she arrived. He feels a sense of irony that he originally suspected her of being a spy, yet now a real spy has appeared to take her. He admits to himself that they truly did something terrible to Lady Masumi. He justifies his past actions by reminding himself that as the commander he has citizens to protect and could not afford to be careless about potential threats. He confesses that he initially saw her only as a convenient substitute and did not care if she hated him because he thought they would never meet again after the ceremony. Ark recalls the moment he entrusted the duties to her and remembers the stable surge of overflowing magic he felt when she played the violin. He acknowledges that without her performance his knights would not have survived and realizes that her music brought him great comfort. Images of shared moments flash through his mind, including her smiling face and the time he helped adjust her hair while they were out shopping. He remembers her bright smile and how they interacted in the dressing room. He realizes that despite his initial coldness, he had greedily started to wish that she would stay by his side. Ark reaches out his hand toward a wooden door as he arrives at his destination on horseback. He is convinced that this is the place he was led to. He thinks about the situation with frustration and declares inwardly that this is all so unreasonable. That I end darkness, where the protagonist recalls the sensation of being choked while spotting Ark's desperate figure through the shadows. The moonlight streams into an old dilapidated shack where Ark stands amidst the rubble of a broken wall. A mysterious man in a cloak stands on a higher wooden platform and remarks that he never expected the Supreme Commander himself to appear in person. The stranger notes with amusement that his little invitation seems to have worked exactly as he intended. Ark looks up with a sharp and angry expression while confirming that he came specifically to see what kind of person would dare to abduct his exclusive musician. Inside the cluttered hideout, the cloaked man stands casually by a wooden table while the female musician sits quietly on a nearby couch. The kidnapper explains that he sent the location map purely because he wanted to see Ark panic rather than out of necessity. He scoffs at Ark's use of the term exclusive musician because he already knows that she is just a temporary substitute. The cloaked man reveals that the woman confessed the truth herself, and he praises her for being a clever little musician. He suddenly decides that he has gathered a sufficient harvest of information and determines that it is time to leave. He leaps agilely from the platform and crashes through the wooden structures to make his escape while stating that he has stalled for enough time. Ark calls out for him to wait, but the man bids them farewell and disappears. Ark immediately rushes over to the couch where the musician is sitting and asks with concern if she is hurt. She stammers a denial and awkwardly thanks him for saving her while clutching her dress. Ark dismisses her gratitude by saying it is nothing and turns his attention away. The pair eventually leaves the hideout and returns to the large estate under the cover of the night sky. Inside the mansion, Ark's dark-haired subordinate expresses anger as he paces around the room while the musician stands with them. The subordinate is furious that the man in black mocked them and concludes that the stranger must be a spy from Reti. He clenches his fist and complains that the spy talked nonsense without knowing their circumstances. Ark tries to calm the situation by telling the musician to worry about her own health rather than him since she was just rescued. The musician points an accusing finger at Ark and demands that he stop using polite titles like lady because it makes her squirm. She furiously recalls how the spy called her useless and infamous and declares that from now on Ark must just call her Kasumi. The subordinate looks surprised by her outburst while Ark agrees to simply call her Kasumi Rees from this point forward. The subordinate continues to vent his frustration about their night order being mocked, but Ark quietly admits that the spy's words were not entirely wrong. The subordinate turns to Ark in disbelief and asks why the Supreme Commander is acting so timidly about the insults. Ark stands solemnly while explaining that the insult was directed at the reality of the Fourth Night Order, which is something they have been told for nearly 10 years. The musician grabs the front of Ark's shirt and angrily asks if he thinks it is acceptable to let people say whatever they want just because it might be true. She questions if the Knight's Oath and their work are really worth so little when they risk their lives daily. Ark looks down with a melancholic expression and says he does not want to hear life lessons from someone who was just kidnapped. He reflects that most people cannot maintain a beginner's heart or uphold a vow through adversity because it takes immense strength. He admits that he feels like an outsider similar to the man in black and confesses that he had given up on himself. Ark apologizes to the musician and explains that his frustration at not being able to retort to the spy caused him to lash out at her instead. The musician firmly rejects his apology and declares that she has made a decision. She announces that she will become the true exclusive musician of the Fourth Night Order. Ark and his subordinate look at her in stunned silence as she stands confidently in the center of the room. She clarifies that she intends to keep performing for him well beyond the investiture ceremony, which leaves Ark confused. Ark reminds her that she was suspected as a spy and ridiculed, yet she still wants to stay. He asks why she changed her mind when she had previously refused so flatly. The musician smiles gently and says she thinks it is not too late to change things. Flashbacks show Ark sitting alone with his instrument as the musician explains that she saw his hidden frustration that night. She realized he hadn't given up on the order and she decided she wanted to support him and find her own place there. Ark takes her hand gently and jokes that she is very serious for someone who was supposed to be a spy. The musician insists again that she is not a spy as she looks up at him with determination. Ark admits he wronged her until now and vows to protect her as his precious exclusive musician from this moment on. Ark expresses his desire for her to stay by his side and play for him again. The musician agrees to work as his genuine exclusive musician and suggests they do this together. They stand close together in the library holding hands and affirming their new partnership. Ark smiles warmly at her as the sunlight begins to filter into the room. The narration concludes that her life as the exclusive musician has officially begun. Meanwhile, in the forest, the cloaked spy dashes rapidly through the trees to put distance between himself and the estate. He pants for breath and thinks to himself that he got involved with a troublesome woman, but admits that seeing the Supreme Commander's face wasn't so bad. The spy pauses and looks back with a sharp gaze while revealing that he has finally found Lady Anastasia. A melancholic flashback inside a modern kitchen where a man slumps over a table in despair while a young girl with dark hair sits quietly in the foreground. The narration reveals that after the mother's death the happy household collapsed because the father suffered greatly whenever he looked at his daughter who resembled her mother. The scene shifts to a snowy street outside a brick house where the father stands with a suitcase next to his daughter who is bundled up in a scarf and preparing to leave for university. She bids her father goodbye and tells him to stay well while apologizing for causing him hardship. The father tells her that their bond as parent and child is not cut and urges her to call him anytime she is in trouble. The daughter smiles brightly with flushed cheeks and promises that she will definitely call him if she needs help. However, the narration reveals that she never kept that promise because she did not want to burden him anymore as he had decided to start a new family. The visual shifts to the daughter walking alone down a street with her suitcase while reflecting that she has lived alone from her high school graduation until now. A memory flashes to a hospital room where she lies in a bed while a man sits beside her holding her hand, but her internal monologue states that there is no one she wants to see or long for anymore. The story returns to the present day where the Fourth Night Order is preparing to depart from the Marino family estate after the kidnapping incident and the jousting tournament. Maids line up in the courtyard to bid farewell while knights load luggage onto a carriage. Lady Anshila stands with the musician Masumi and expresses her gratitude while admitting that she wishes they could stay forever because her family has become so small since her mother passed away. Anshila blushes happily and presents a gift to Masumi which she describes as a token of their promise. Masumi promises that she will return next year to play as long as she keeps her job. Masumi opens the envelope to reveal an old piece of sheet music which Anshila explains is a memento her mother received from a certain musician before she married. Anshila explains that she cannot play instruments herself and felt sorry that the music was just gathering dust, so she wants Masumi to hold on to it. She asks Masumi to play the piece for her when they meet again because Masumi is the one she trusts and the one who saved her heart. Masumi clutches the folder of sheet music to her chest and agrees to take care of it and return next year to perform the piece. The carriage travels through a forest path while Masumi sits inside looking exhausted and overwhelmed. The dark-haired subordinate advises her to rest while she can because she will officially start working as the musician for the Fourth Night Order once they reach the imperial capital. He explains that musicians must provide magical energy on the battlefield so knights can demonstrate their training, but notes that there won't be large battles for the time being. Lord Ark sits silently in the carriage with his arms crossed while Masumi asks what a musician usually does since she cannot picture it. The subordinate explains that they spend free time practicing or researching music to perform under any circumstances, which Masumi notes is similar to preparing for a competition. Ark adds that she can use the room and office of the previous musician and says getting her a uniform won't take much time. Masumi points out that the knights must be tired after the investiture ceremonies and jousting matches, but the subordinate dismisses it by saying she shouldn't underestimate their stamina. Masumi then brings up the marriage selection battle, where nobles eyed the knights like prey during the after-party. She teases them by asking how it felt to be the two most popular men there. Ark looks flustered and annoyed while the subordinate asks if Ark is being picky or just not interested unless the woman is a noble lady. Ark stammers that it is not about nobility but rather about music. Masumi looks confused while the subordinate lectures her that in his country skill alone does not guarantee a partner. Masumi decides to stop the conversation and lies down on the carriage seat to sleep while telling them to wake her when they reach the inn. As she closes her eyes, she thinks to herself that she doesn't need to be with anyone because she can live as long as she has her violin. However, she admits internally that she feels a little strange as her hand rests near her face. The scene changes to a grand palace at night where a cloaked figure runs through a hallway and opens a large door. The spy Rhino enters a room and announces his return to Lady Anastasia, who is standing by a window. Anastasia welcomes him back warmly and expresses relief that he is safe. Rhino kneels before her and explains that he knows his limits and withdrew from the duel against the Supreme Commander of the Fourth Night Order. Anastasia admits she worried because he is reckless and she blames herself for forcing too much on him because she wanted to know more about Lord Arkelstov. Rhino reassures her that he is her knight and has no regrets if he can fulfill her wish. Anastasia reveals that she turned down 3 marriage proposals while he was away because she does not need them right now. She explains that thinking about the Martial Music Festival kept her from sleeping because she believed Rhino would succeed in finding the summoned musician. She asks anxiously where the musician was found because winning the festival is essential for her dream to come true. Rhino hesitates and warns her that the situation is not favorable but reveals that the musician landed in Alberic. He shows a flashback of Masumi playing the violin and states that the musician ended up in the hands of the Fourth Night Order's Supreme Commander. He explains that someone of that level would never overlook such incredible talent and notes that summoning even one person is easy for a high-ranking mage. Anastasia looks shocked as she realizes her feelings haven't changed and Rhino confirms that his master is still in love with Lord Arkelstov. She declares with determination that she will not give up and plans to win the Martial Music Festival to get what she wants. She vows to take him back from the enemy nation of Alberic regardless of the difficulty. Rhino kisses her hand in a gesture of submission and promises to become her hands and feet because he cannot resist her. The narration concludes by stating that this was always a love with an expiration date and notes that the princess will likely go her whole life without ever knowing the knight's true feelings. The view of the bustling imperial capital and the towering castle where knights train with wooden swords under the watchful eye of Lord Serge. Inside a well-furnished room, Kasumi stands before a large oval mirror to carefully tie the ribbon of her uniform's collar. She checks her reflection with a confident smile and notes that 10 days have passed since she arrived at the capital to begin her new life as a musician. Kasumi walks into the crowded dining hall where many knights are eating, and she immediately draws attention as whispers ripple through the room about her distinctive scarf and identity. She sits alone at a table by the window and eats her meal while feeling self-conscious about the special treatment that isolates her from the others. As she eats, she reflects on her daily routine of recovering the knight's magic power in her dedicated musician's room, where knights visit her almost every day. Flashbacks show her busy workdays where she plays the violin for exhausted knights who sit on the beds in her office to regain their strength. Back in the present, Serge Valise approaches her table with a tray of food and politely asks if he may sit with her, to which she agrees. Kasumi observes him and recalls that he is a former high-ranking holy knight who now serves as a trusted instructor for the order. Serge sits down with a massive pile of food that dwarfs Kasumi's modest plate, and he remarks that she does not seem to eat very much. He gratefully tells her that thanks to her music, the knights no longer fall short of magic and can give their all during training. Kasumi is humbled by his praise and admits that playing from morning until night is something she could never do alone. After their meal, they walk together through the grand hallways of the castle while Serge asks if she has gotten used to life in the capital. Kasumi smiles brightly and admits that while she got lost at first, she has learned her way around and is grateful to walk freely without being suspected as a spy. In the main hall, they encounter Lord Ark, who is waiting for them with his arms crossed. Ark confirms that he is heading to the musician's room as well, noting that he heard voices coming from there earlier. Serge excuses himself to join the training session to warm up, running off with high energy while Kasumi watches him go with a smile. Ark stays behind and asks if he can drop by her place during the break, and Kasumi agrees before heading off to start her own work. Kasumi returns to her office and opens the window to let in fresh air before collapsing onto her chair with a sigh of exhaustion. She sits at her desk filled with papers and begins the task of writing sheet music because she possesses no scores from this world. She painstakingly writes down songs from memory with a quill to build a repertoire that can provide different magical recovery effects. Suddenly, a massive explosion rocks the training grounds outside, sending debris flying and causing knights to scatter in panic. The door to Kasumi's room bursts open as Serge rushes in carrying a heavily bleeding knight in his arms. He apologizes for the intrusion but declares it an emergency as he lays the injured men on the beds and floor of her room. Ark arrives shortly after and looks down in shock at the room filled with wounded squires lying on the carpet. Serge stands with a pained expression and confesses that it was his failure of supervision because he unleashed a powerful area attack without realizing squires were in the restricted zone. He explains that he never imagined anyone would be there and misjudged the boundaries of the training ground. Serge wipes sweat from his face and laments that the training grounds are far too small for their needs, wishing the nation would provide better facilities. He asks Kasumi to perform magic recovery so he can cast healing magic on the injured men, and despite her fear of the blood and severity, she agrees. Kasumi trembles slightly but steels herself, reminding herself that she has handled emergencies before, and begins to play her violin. Later that night, the room is quiet as the treated knights sleep on the beds and floor while Kasumi sleeps exhausted at her desk. Ark enters the room quietly and gently places a coat over Kasumi's shoulders to keep her warm. Kasumi wakes up, and Ark informs her that the injured knights avoided severe lasting damage thanks to her quick assistance. Kasumi looks down humbly and says she was scared her hands wouldn't move, but Ark praises her for playing anyway and notes that she significantly sped up the settlement of the incident. Ark sits on the sofa and questions whether such serious injuries happen often, noting that training usually has strict restrictions. He explains that the training grounds are far too small for the total number of knights, but their complaints to the country have been ignored. Ark reveals that because Kasumi made magic recovery possible, the knights began training much harder, which overloaded the barely manageable grounds and led to the accident. He asserts that they can no longer stay silent about the issue and vows not to back down against the higher-ups. Ark notices Kasumi's fatigue and kindly tells her to return to her room to rest while he stays behind to finish some work. Kasumi leaves the room and walks down the empty corridor while Ark watches her go from the window. Once she is gone, Serge appears in the doorway and Ark asks him how the report regarding the training grounds went. Serge replies that there seems to be a chance the authorities will finally consider expanding the grounds now. Serge adds that he has news regarding Lady Masumi, stating that this is how things should be. The chapter concludes with the ominous implication that the higher-ups have now set their eyes on Lady Masumi. Masumi stretches her arm high in the air with a soft grunt after a long session of playing the violin. She is startled by a voice asking if she is taking a break and turns around to find Lord Serge casually sitting on the sofa behind her. She jumps in surprise and asks how long he has been there because she didn't notice him at all. Serge calmly replies that he has been there for almost an hour but erased his presence so he wouldn't disturb her work. Serge offers her a cup of tea for a change of pace and praises her hard work while Masumi blushes slightly and thanks him. He smiles gently and tells her to call out to him anytime she needs something. The scene shifts to the next chapter titled, "The Court Really Is Different." The setting changes to the grand and imposing imperial palace where Masumi stands looking up in awe at the massive architecture. Ark explains that the country seems to be seriously considering expanding the training grounds after receiving the Fourth Order's appeal. He notes that the higher-ups can no longer ignore the accident caused by Serge's magic 2 days ago. Masumi sips her tea and remarks that everyone is still struggling even though the expansion is not yet certain. Ark agrees and reflects that even though Serge's misconduct triggered this change, it feels like a whole new era for the Order. He mentions that veterans often talk about the past when they had to cut costs just to hire a musician and even submitted documents on scrap paper. Ark smiles warmly and expresses his gratitude to Masumi because her presence means they no longer have to resort to such desperate measures. He emphasizes that everyone in the Order is truly thankful for her. Masumi blushes deeply and humbly insists that she hasn't done anything worth being thanked for, but Ark gently corrects her by reminding her that her quick action during the accident prevented a disaster. Ark leans forward and earnestly tells her that she is more than deserving of their gratitude. Masumi looks down shyly and thinks to herself that she is happy to be actually useful so that such an accident never happens again. She resolves to work harder in the future. Suddenly the door bursts open and Serge rushes in with an urgent expression to interrupt their relaxing moment. He informs them that they have received a summons from the commander of the court knights and must come immediately. Masumi looks confused and asks why she is being summoned while wondering if it is because of yesterday's accident. Ark reassures her that the accident matter is proceeding smoothly but explains that the summons is regarding the issue of making an unknown musician his exclusive. They rush down the hallway while Ark complains that as long as ability is guaranteed it usually isn't questioned. He wonders why an exclusive musician needs to have their identity thoroughly checked. They arrive at a set of massive ornate doors and Masumi feels intimidated by the grandeur of the court knight's headquarters. Ark pushes the heavy doors open and they enter a large hall where a mysterious robed figure stands waiting for them. The figure greets Lord Arkelstov with a cold smile. The robed person removes their hood to reveal a woman with sharp eyes who sarcastically calls Ark hot-tempered as ever. Ark glares back and warns that he won't hesitate if the court mage corps doesn't change their attitude. He firmly states that the Fourth Order will never have its wings broken and reminds her that they are equals by right. Another figure steps forward from the shadows and reveals himself to be the vice commander of the court mage corps. He speaks with a condescending tone and remarks that he has heard the rumors about the exclusive musician. He dismisses Ark's threat by saying he doesn't have time for petty quarrels but warns that there won't be a next time regarding the invisibility spell incident. The vice commander summons a majestic glowing eagle made of magic that perches on his arm while staring down at them. He turns his attention to Masumi and states that he wanted to talk with her specifically. Masumi looks up at him with a mixture of fear and confusion as the chapter concludes with an intense confrontation.